Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this on tonight's program. Sorry, I'm so used to doing solo flights. This is actually a regular program. You know, it's just one of those days. It's been a long week, folks. But anyway, this will be our state-of-the-art radio program, and as always, I am joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. Folks, go ahead and make yourself comfortable because we're going to go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, here it is. We are at a juncture in this 2016 presidential election cycle thus far. As on yesterday's Solo Flight Special, we covered the topic of the violence that has been swirling around the campaign of Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, and it's having an effect. It's absolutely having an effect right now, and what those effects will mean for the second round of a Super Tuesday decision in this election cycle remains to be seen. But we'll go ahead and get started with something that I thought was rather humorous and speaks volumes about the former candidate who has since dropped out and thrown his support behind Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. And of course, the person I'm speaking of is Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson, Sir Shanks-a-lot. He came out and said that Trump doesn't believe the stuff he says, but refused to elaborate on it because he said it was a private conversation. I'd sure like to know what that private conversation entailed and whether it meant that Trump was going to bring back some of those statements that he had, basically calling Carson a pathological child molester. I don't know how you can be a pathological child molester. I thought that's a bit redundant, but that's what we are seeing. He is basically forgiving Donaldus for everything he said, but not forgiving what Cruz had done, even though Cruz hadn't done anything wrong. I mean, Jeremy, have you ever seen anything quite this bizarre in a presidential election cycle?
Not in my short time on this earth, or an even shorter time in paying attention to election cycles of any nature. Mm-hmm. I'm a bit confused by, Mr. Victim Carson there. He says he had this private conversation with Trump saying, well, he doesn't mean what he says. I'm just wondering if, him and Donaldus or Don Adolf Julius Trumpolini.
Hi, Trumpolini, yes.
If they were sitting there sharing, each other's company, smoking cigars, drinking brandy,
except that Trumpolini doesn't drink or smoke, much like Adolf Hitler didn't either.
Right, but that's what he says. But remember, before he says, "Well, I've had, this is very good wine, blah blah, whatever the case is."
Yeah,
but that private conversation, I'm just wondering if they were playing back those tapes or that tape from the New York Times, the one that he still has not released or gave the consent to be released. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, maybe Carson has listened to it. I that's why it's so confusing. He makes these statements that, well, I don't believe he means what he says, which is kind of the crux of those tapes.
Yeah,
the whole hinge pin with them. So it's a bit confusing. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and I'm really flustered with this. And it's not only that, but it's just the rage that I can feel welling up in my gut because they are making a mockery of our election process.
Not just our
it's
election
embarrassing.
process, but I'd say they're making a mockery of our republic.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing. No wonder other countries are pointing and laughing at us.
Mm-hmm.
Even more so now than the
Mm-hmm.
past 7 years.
Yeah, because it would be a continuation of the past 7 years. This
Sure.
would be the third term for Barack Hussein Obama and his imperial fascist banana republic.
Yeah,
And
you know, not to cut you off, but it just hit me. You know what this is?
hmm,
An individual, a spring breaker on a 3-day drinking binge. The first 4 years of Obama was day one. This is day two, and now it's going to be day three, to where it's just imbibe as much alcohol as you can and just puke everywhere because you can't handle it.
yeah, and ruin everything that's good and
Yeah,
decent
yeah.
in the process. But you know, what this confirms is our suspicions that Trump is deceiving his voters. I've said that ever since he first officially threw his hat in the ring. Folks, we here at the Wright Flyer were among the first to start sounding the warning siren with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini.
The air raid siren.
Oh, yeah, it's the air raid siren of a coming calamity and disaster. And here's the problem. When you look at some of the recent polling that's coming out of all of these different places, now, generally, we are averse to polls. They have been shown to be inaccurate and wrong time and again, even in this 2016 presidential election cycle. But when you have as many polls coming out showing that Trump is falling further and further and further behind in head-to-head hypothetical match-offs between both Hillary Rotten Clinton and Noid-Face Boing Me Sandoz, there's a problem. There's a problem there, because it shows that if you don't have an energetic base going into that election for the general election, you're just not going to win. We saw that play out in 2008 and in 2012. Mm-hmm. And if things are going the way that the commensurate of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have projected that it would go, then we'd have Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini, and we'd go to absolute failure. We'd go to defeat. And it's because there is all of this controversy and scandal that swirls around the Donaldus like a shadow. It follows him everywhere. And I know I've already heard people like Bill O'Reilly on the Fix News channel sitting there saying that, no, Trumpolini had nothing to do with the violence that broke out at those rallies. But here's the question. What other candidate has had violence break out at their campaigns? Because if it wasn't Trumpolini, and if it was just the media, you would certainly think that it would break out in other gutless opposition party candidates' rallies and political events, because let's face it, folks, the salivating mainstream media ain't going to like any of the candidates on the right. But there is a common denominator, and this is what you can't ignore. Violence goes around one candidate and one candidate alone.
Well, this also begs the question, what other candidate has stood up at a podium and says, knock the hell out of them? If they're going to throw tomatoes, beat them down, beat the hell out of them, stop them, do whatever it takes. Don't worry about the legal fees. I will pay for them. I promise, I promise, I promise.
Like all the other slews of his promises, I don't think that he would live up to that one either.
Well, and the thing is, you know, again, these miscreants who call themselves journalists, they are defending him and saying, well, you know, he that's just Trump. That's how he is. He speaks his mind. He doesn't really that's the problem. He doesn't think before he speaks. He has all of these campaign promises. Fact is, he incited riots, period.
And in fact, in North Carolina, there is a police department at one of the sites where violence broke out that is seeking, where the 79-year-old Trump supporter punched that Black Lives Matters operative. Now, folks, we don't support Black Lives Matters. We don't support any of these social Marxists. We consider them deplorable. And I will be getting into a bit more with protesting a little bit later on because of something that Rush Limbaugh said on his program today, and we'll flesh that out. But with respect to this North Carolina Police Department or Sheriff's Department seeking to actually charge Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini with inciting a riot, that goes hand in hand with what Jeremy is saying there and the warnings that we have been espousing here on the Wright Flyer ever since Donaldus officially threw his hat in the ring. These are not things that we can ignore. These are trends that show a repetitive cycle. And historically speaking, we've seen this sort of behavior occur before in totalitarian states. Now, Bill O'Reilly tried to come out and say that those who are comparing Trump to fascism are fascists themselves. That's a nice attempt at deflection there, Billy boy. Why don't you go have another milkshake with the Donaldus at some meaningless sporting event and leave the country to real Americans who care about their republic, the future of their country, the health and well-being of their country, and to ensure that our greatest birthright, the fundamental and unalienable rights that were endowed to us by our Creator and are codified within the four corners of our shared Constitution, are handed down to the up-and-coming generation, and yes, even those generations yet to be born. But taking that a step further, not even just handing it to them, but expanding it for them so that they have a greater chance and opportunity to exercise and enjoy those rights than we, the current generation, have.
Well, I think what little Billy O'Reilly needs to do is he needs to go back and look at some historical publications.
Since he likes to tout history
Sure.
with killing Lincoln, killing hair follicles, killing dogs, I don't know what all books he has.
Yeah. Well, killing brain cells is what I would get from those. And here's the thing. Billy Boy O'Reilly, why don't you go read Der Angriff? You know, the Nazi publication that Joseph Goebbels took over. And
the angry attack.
The angry attack. Because, see, everything that happened there and the whole basis of all that propaganda is exactly what Trump is doing. Mm-hmm. He is fueling his supporters' blind fury and telling them that it's okay to embrace it and to act on it. That is exactly what Goebbels told the German people after he convinced them that it was the Jews, it was the non-Germans, it was pretty much everybody that did not adhere to the Reich that was the downfall of and prevention of Germany being a rising nation again.
It's always the existential that they point to for blame. It's never...
And it's all projection. It's all projection. Projection is one of the key fundamental tenets of propaganda.
Of course it is, because you have a target audience. You select that audience. You inject your point of view into it. And one of the things that both Hitler and Goebbels taking it from Hitler, is you don't focus on concrete facts. You focus on abstract principles. You play to emotions. Well, like
theatrics.
Yeah, it's absolutely theatrics. It's political kabuki theater. Now, folks, what kabuki theater is, that's in Japan. They have, it's like puppetry, but you can see the puppeteer. You're just supposed to ignore the puppeteer and just get into the flow of the play. Well, that's what propaganda is. You know there's somebody driving it, but you allow yourself to displace reality and just go into the message and get caught up in the message. And that's how you can get the crowd hysteria that you would see at the Nazi rallies, and surprisingly, well, not that surprisingly, if you're a student of history, at the Trumpolini rallies.
Sure. And, we make light of this in certain aspects. We'll crack jokes in this and that, but we do it so that there is a deeper understanding or a better connection made. And, slightly so that we don't lose our own sanity. And with going with that, it's almost like, at the end of the day, when all the smoke and mirrors are smashed and the smoke clears, you're going to see Trump supporters vacate their position for him, and they're going to be more infuriated and more angry, because not only at Trump, but they're going to be angry at themselves. And that's where the righteous indignation is going to come. And we're going to see anger to the likes of what the colonials had during the first American Revolution. And that's what's going to happen. And that's what's coming down the pipe if people don't wise up and pay attention to what's going on right now. And when I say what's going on right now, is the history being brought to the forefront and applied across the board with this.
Mm-hmm. And, with what Carson was saying with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini, it aligns with the negotiation tactics that Trump outlined in The Art of the Deal. He always said, take the most extreme, radical position and then whittle your way back. So that tells me right there that he's duping his voters. And I've even seen some of his voters come out and complain about that, saying, no, we understand what's going on. Clearly, you don't. Because if you're supporting him for these hardline stances, you have to realize those are not the positions he advocates. He is basically using these people as a series of pawns in his political game, and it is going to be our liberty and our fundamental and unalienable rights that are put up for negotiation, when in fact those very things are non-negotiable.
And this goes back again to what you were talking about with, creating a false narrative, not using the absolutes, but using the distractions and creating these urges and these senses and these perceptions in the minds of people. What Trump is doing and what he did right from the get-go, he created this sense of anger, is what he did. He fueled it. He created it. He's been harping on it. And at every one of his rallies, he brings it up. He does exactly what Goebbels and Hitler did with giving these projections instead of giving the facts and taking the hard line on things. He stirs everything up, and then everybody takes that and they formulate their own version of the facts, and then he takes that and runs with it. Mm-hmm. So he's creating the projection, making people believe one thing, and then collectively he's gathering all that up and then turning that into a driving force to where it just, emboldens them. It makes them writhe more with anger. It's agitation. It's almost like, and I'm going to go back to the schoolyard bully thing. The schoolyard bully is the one that does all the pounding. And that's what Trump is doing. But he has his agitators, provoking people, antagonizing people, stirring stuff up, saying, well, this person said this about you. And going back to the other person and say, well, this person said this about you. And getting these people squabbling back and forth, creating their own conjecture. And then the bully comes in. And if the bully doesn't feel like beating on people, he'll create a situation where other people beat on people. And that's what's happened with these rallies, with him inciting violence. It's no different.
Mm-hmm. And, it plays into this understanding that we have with respect to the left, because the left plays on emotion. And that is what Trump is doing as well. And, it leads to a certain question that needs to be addressed. And that is, why would Carson follow a candidate who privately admits that he is not a zealous advocate for his espoused positions? Because what Carson was saying is that he was staying in the race for as long as he did because he wanted to get a message out. But wouldn't this, just by logic and by the narrative of the way polity works, be tarnishing and damaging and harming both his message and his reputation? This is something that the punditry of the salivating mainstream media just have not focused on. And I think that he has damaged himself with the followers he had. We ourselves here on the Wright Flyer used to say that Carson was a man of principle, but we've since had to retract that.
Well, and it's because it seems like he's abandoned his own principles is what has happened. And he's bought into this blind fury rather than having, maintaining his principles and not vacating them in order to have righteous anger. And that's the difference. And Carson seems to be an emotional individual to begin with. He may not show his emotions very well, but if anybody knows how to read body language, you can look at Carson. You can tell he's an emotional individual. He's made comments to where, well, gee, I wish somebody would attack me. That's almost like saying, hey, I don't want to be the last person to be picked for dodgeball or kickball or whatever other schoolyard sport, because if I'm continuously picked last, then I'm going to develop a sense of low self-esteem. I'm not going to be able to handle my emotions. I'm not going to be able to function as the type of individual that I have been functioning as. And it can create a psychosis that could be detrimental for him or other people around him. And that worries me. I don't want to see anybody, succumb to that, but it happens. It's a reality. And I think Carson is heading down that road, to be honest.
He's been heading down that road since the first debate, and there's no denying that. And, when you look at the fact that he is supporting somebody who is already claiming to him in private that he will not be a zealous advocate for the positions that he has held since officially throwing his hat in the ring, it should bring the entire Trumpolini campaign into question. And that's certainly the questions we have been asking since the start of this entire 2016 presidential election cycle. We have seen the telltale signs there, and Trumpus's past speaks volumes about who he is as a man and the positions that he will continue to hold going into this current election cycle. I've always thought it funny when people say that when you're vetting for a candidate, their past doesn't matter. That's wrong, blatantly wrong, because the best measuring stick or yardstick that you have in determining or predicting future behavior and conduct is based off of past statements, positions, beliefs, and actions. I mean, that's what you call a record. That's why you say you vet a politician by checking their record. Now, of course, Donaldus likes to claim he's not a politician because he's not been inside an elected office, but his past statements are part of public record and are there for everyone to see. And he is worse than a politician in many respects because he is the very one that has enabled, through financing, these various politicians that are the worst sort, the worst offenders in attempting to tear down our shared Constitution. And that doesn't seem to hold any weight or water with a vast majority, or at least of the vocal minority, because we're not really sure what all Trumpolini believers advocate. But the vocal minority of them don't care. It's as if facts are nothing. And again, that ties into the attack, which was the German Nazi propaganda rag in Berlin Yeah, Der Angriff, that was used to flip Berlin into the pro-Nazi category, and it never really worked the way that the Nazis wanted. Don't get me wrong, Nazi propaganda was powerful and efficient, but not where people were attuned to other factors and were diametrically opposed to the message that was being peddled. But with respect to Carson and Donaldus, we see that basically Donaldus is the epitome of an unethical opportunist. That is the warning sign that we have been trying to share with the people since Donaldus officially threw his hat in the ring and since the time of our pilot episode, yes, folks, pun intended there, which aired on September 11th of 2015. And it has only shown signs of getting worse.
Well, let's go back and look at some of Trump's actions. Ted Cruz brought to light some actions by Donald Trump. Just, I believe it was today or yesterday. I believe it was today. The funding in Chicago for the Chicago political machine. You know, you had Blagojevich was given $7,000 by Trump. I can't remember who the next one was. It was like $12,500.
That may have been to the Daily Machine.
Yeah, you know, something, you know, some political organization or whatever, Democratic organization. And then Rahm Emanuel, former Obama lackey, turned
mayor
of Chicago,
mm-hmm.
$50,000 for his campaign. Now, but it goes deeper than that. In fact, it goes even so far deep as back as, well, let's just go a few years back, 2013. Attorney General of Florida, Pamela Bondi, was looking into investigating Trump and Trump University because of individuals in Florida filing a lawsuit. And she was looking as state attorneys general for Florida into, you know, the lawsuit and so on and so forth. Lo and behold, she receives, well, not her exactly, not her particularly, but an association affiliated with her in her campaign, her war chest, so to speak, a $25,000 check from Trump.
And then miraculously, all of the charges dropped from there on out.
There's no hint of it. So if Trump says he can't be bought, wrong, because what he has done is he sold his soul to skirt and obstruct justice.
That has been his modus operandi for a very long time, going back at least 30 years with respect to greasing the palms of the people in New York when he was using the Polish brigade of illegal aliens to help construct Trump Tower. Folks, this is not stuff that's made up. This is
it's documented proof.
Yeah, and it goes to the foundation of who Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini is as a man, which means that you're not going to change these characteristics with him. He's not going to all of a sudden, out of the blue, change who he is just because it will be the right thing to do. I don't think he has a moral compass in any way, shape, or form. Nobody who sits there and says that if his daughter wasn't his daughter, he'd like to date her and that she has a great body, that's creepy. That takes the creepy factor to a whole new level.
Well, you know what, Randy? If I was to say that about one of my children, you know, well, stepchildren, but I consider them to be mine. I raised them for 17 years. If I would have had a statement like that, I'd be in prison right now. Mm-hmm. I would be in prison. Absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous the where, you know, he gets a pass. Why? Because you know, he's
He's an
launched.
elitist.
He's you know what? He's a Hollywood elitist.
Yeah.
And because Trump is nothing more than an entertainer. In fact, he has even alleged that and alluded to that himself at his own rallies when he said, you know what? What did you have better to do than to come to a Trump rally?
Oh, I don't know. Watching paint dry would be one thing for me.
While
But
flies fornicate in the midst of it. You know,
sure.
it's just the point is he says he can't be bought. Other people say he can't be bought, but yet he has been bought. He has been bought in the worst way. In fact, if he has sold his soul to the devil 10 times over, because when you want to do actions like this, claiming you never settled out of court, wrong. You've settled numerous times. So you lied about it. You try and shut people up by putting money in their pockets. What you are doing is your soul has been sold, period. Because you negate and you forego all sense of moral and ethical compasses and actions in standing up for and sustaining a viable means of being an individual. It's ridiculous. But you can't be bought. Wrong. You have been bought, and you are owned. You are owned by your own devilish deeds.
And, you know, Iowa's Steve King said recently in a media get-together, I guess it was a press conference, that there is a pattern of Trump's buying off conservatives for big-name endorsements. And this includes the use of blackmail when candidates refuse to endorse him. So Trump boasts about having bought politicians in the past, and nothing suggests that he's abandoned this practice. In fact, if anything, the rather shocking endorsement by Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson just doubles down on this perception, at least. And remember, folks, perception is almost half of the game in the arena of politics, that Trump is continuing with this path of corruption.
You know, and we can go back to what was the mafia boss's name? Cicerno?
Oh, you're thinking of well, there were several. There's Charlie Luciano, you know, Lucky Luciano.
Yep. But all the mafia bosses. Here's the thing. If anybody knows anything about organized crime, when you put money in the pockets of the organized crime to, you know, pay them, guess what? They will turn around and flip it back on you to where you owe them much more.
Now, this is interesting. We have somebody who's commenting on the program already. Trump is self-funding his campaign. No, not really, Mr. HNN Rules or Mrs. HNN Rules. I don't know what your gender is, but no, he is not self-funding. He has loaned money to himself to then pay off the campaign and then pay himself back. You know what that's called in the real world, HNN Rules? That's called money laundering. So if that gets him immunity with you, that's all right. That just speaks volumes about your character.
Well, I'm confused again, Randy, because when did Donald Trump become George Soros? Because George Soros has given $120 million to Donald Trump. $120 million. Not only that, but Trump and Soros are business partners.
Oh, and HNN Rules, if Cruz reminds you of Uncle Fester, then you've got more problems than you're letting on here. Sorry, we understand that logic may be difficult for you. You can get help. There is a path for you to get help. You can go to your local community clinic. They will try and help you. And see, we're reaching the olive branch out to you.
And, you know, to further extend that olive branch, maybe you can go down to the library. And there's a nifty little book called The Chronicles of Trump Tardia. maybe you can, check it out and read it. And if you struggle with it, I'm sure they have it written in crayon.
Oh, they may even have a special pop-up edition. He might like the pop-up edition.
I don't know. The last time, somebody of this stature that I know of that, utilized the pop-up book, they actually lost their eyesight, which is going to cost them more time at the clinic.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it would.
I mean, we're just, looking out for your best interests there. So,
But we see that cronyism is a central pillar of Trump. And apparently his followers, at least from this one that's commented it 3 times, I don't know why they can't just, condense it to one comment. They feel this need to just spew, much like their Führer, Der Führer, Heil Trumpolini. But
well, the monkey has to take a break because, working its fingers that quick on the keyboard kind of, hurts it a little bit. So, and, we really don't want, PETA to get involved for the abuse of primates or, chimpanzees or other animals. So,
yeah,
but I can understand why they commented 3 times.
Yeah.
We'll give them a pass on that.
Okay. You're nicer than I am. Trump is all about branding. And corruption is his brand. He won't change that because that would alienate his persona and his carefully crafted image. He is in this for himself, just as he's been in everything for himself. And the Democrats are going to use this to their advantage in the general election. And therefore, Trump personifies the 1%er stupid argument that the left has been campaigning against. That straw man, actually, I guess we could say that Trump is the quaff man that satisfies their campaign argument.
And see, what they don't understand with this quaff man and the straw man argument is eventually somebody comes by with a lit match and the whole argument gets burnt to ashes.
Yeah, especially when you consider how much hair gel and spray he puts in that skunk pelt.
It reminds me of when Michael Jackson's hair caught on fire back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself there, folks, but,
But, so you see, Donald uses violence to further his strategy of divide and conquer. It reinforces the categorization of us versus them. And folks, this is once again straight out of Joseph Goebbels' tenets of propaganda.
Well, you know what this is, Randy? It's the billionaire blitzkrieg. That's what it is.
The real estate Rommel is rolling down the
That's right.
down the campaign trail.
Yeah.
But it's up to real constitutionalists to put some landmines in there to blow the tread off of his tank.
Sure. And those landmines, by the way, folks, are really actually considered to be truth bombs. That's all they are. They're truth bombs wrapped in facts, logic, and reason. They're indestructible until they go boom. And then when they go boom, every falsity and fallacy that's out there no longer exists.
Yeah.
The truth has no agenda. It serves one purpose and one purpose only, to make sure that the facts are straight. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's what we're about here, is just the facts. And the facts are quite clear that Donald Trump is using divide and conquer. And that makes the supporters feel like they are a part of something greater. It makes them feel like instead of a small box of crowns, they're getting a big one with the sharpener on the back. And that just makes them feel really special.
The 64 count size. Yeah, I remember that.
And then the media has been complicit with all of this. They have fueled this fire. That's the one thing that Bill O'Reilly got right on the Fix News Network tonight. In so much as, yes, the media has helped create the phenomenon that is Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini, but they have taken it a step further. They are using this in such a way as to help propel him to frontrunner status as they have, but they're waiting on the more incendiary stuff to just blow him apart when it gets to the general election. Folks, you have to keep election strategy in mind when it comes to any and all of this. And I am rather surprised that Donaldus hasn't formulated something to combat this, or hasn't even figured out that this is a major detraction and shortcoming of his campaign.
Well, the reason is he's not thinking that far ahead, because, again, he's banking on his name. He's banking on his rhetoric. He's banking on his flamboyancy to stand alone so that he doesn't have to have a contingency plan to refute or defend against it. See, this is what happens with potentates and dictators who try to utilize certain propaganda, and they go full tilt in one direction with it, but they don't pay attention to all of the propaganda. See, Trump's propaganda in his campaign is not boomerang proof. No. Goebbels even said propaganda must be instituted in such a way that it is boomerang proof, meaning it cannot come back to bite you or to hit you. Guess what? We are the ones throwing that boomerang back at you time and time again, and we will continue to do so, even if you're not the nominee, which you probably won't be.
God willing. And, you know, Donald thrives off of the publicity.
Sure.
And the media has just been giving it to him in droves for free.
Well, Trump-Bart.
Yeah, Trump-Bart. And we will be getting into that in the next segment or two here. But this now raises a significant question. What about the claims that the protesters violated Donaldus's free speech rights? Well, the First Amendment protects against governmental infractions of free speech. Yes. The protesters are thugs, but not government. And the violence should be, handled by law enforcement. The First Amendment does not protect fighting words. That entire doctrine of if you're inciting violence, if you are going to a following and preaching that they punch somebody in the face, or in the past they take them out on stretchers, let's get back to that sort of thing, that is criminal incitation of violence.
Yes. You cannot, again, this is one of the very simple fundamental aspects of understanding your constitutional rights and having a working knowledge of them. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this on every single one of our constitutional episodes, for our constitutional series. We've talked about this on just about every single episode. In order for your rights to actually be utilized and protected when you exercise them, you cannot use them to diminish or infringe upon the rights of other people. Mm-hmm. When you call for violent action or for someone to have their life threatened or intimidated or prohibit an individual from exercising their rights, you are committing a felony. You can look it up. It's Title 18 U.S. Code, Sections 241 and 242. Conspiracy against rights and deprivation of rights. When you exercise your freedom of speech by making the offer to pay for someone's legal fees if they rough people up, you are soliciting them to commit violence.
Yeah.
That is what you're doing. Therefore, when you do that, that is a criminal act. And when you use your rights to engage in criminal activity, you forego the exercising of your rights, because you cannot exercise your rights and be a criminal at the same time in conjunction with it. It cannot happen. It is impossible. So this notion that, well, Trump has a right to give his speech, yes, he does. But when he utilizes that podium and that platform to engage in criminal activity, he forgoes that right.
Yeah.
Because it is infringing upon other people's rights. People have the right to say what they want against him. Why? Because he is a public official. Therefore, there's no slander, no libel, no defamation suits can be brought. There's no criminal activity for someone saying, you're a liar, you're wrong, you're a fascist, you're a racist, whatever the case is.
Yeah, maybe odious.
Just because you don't like what someone says, it doesn't give you the right to infringe upon their rights to shut them up.
Right. It may be odious, but unless and until they cross over the threshold and start infringing upon other popular sovereigns' rights, then it's not a problem. And this is the problem that a lot of media punditry has engaged in. They have tried to put it that it's silencing Donald Trump's rights. But as Jeremy just explained there, it's not. Now, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, folks. There were two young Sanders voters who thought they'd get a kick out of attending a North Carolina Trump rally. And the reason I put out that they were Sanders voters is, look, you can take this with a grain of salt, but their eyewitness account is pretty shocking. And I don't think that they would lie about that, because they even said that when they were going in, it was just to laugh. But they wound up not laughing at the end of it. They wound up being horrified by some of the things that they saw. And it's when Trump took the stage and he started throwing out protesters, irrespective of whether they were peaceful or not. If somebody's just standing there with an anti-Trump shirt or with a shirt that says, love is the way or love is the answer, and he throws them out for that, I can't even perceive that as necessarily being a statement against Trump. I thought Trump was trying to come out and say that he wants to unite the party, that he wants people to coalesce behind him. Well, that's certainly a funny way of showing it.
Well, Trump has even claimed that he has already done that. Remember, all the Democrat voters, all the people that crossed over and came into the Republican Party because of him. Remember, those are his words.
Yeah, aren't those the Democrats that merely crossed over to vote for him because they thought he was the weakest candidate and that would allow the Democrats to succeed? Sure. I've seen that all over social media.
Sure, and regardless of why they did it, he took credit for it. Mm-hmm. And he's taking credit for, unifying people and uniting people together. But then he turns around and throws somebody out because they're standing there wearing paraphernalia that he doesn't like because it speaks against him.
Yeah.
Gee, so much for freedom of speech. Then he wants to go out and have his little lapdogs and, pundits, when he rings the bell, start salivating on, oh, Trump's rights were violated by these protesters. Mm-hmm. You can't have it both ways, folks. You can't. Just because he's Trump, I don't care who he is. I don't care who he is, because if he's allowed to get away with that, then what happens? The sanctity of the Constitution regarding equal protection under the laws is completely gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what he's aiming for. I truly believe he does not want anything in the Constitution to be there if it doesn't align with his narrative. And this is why I've asked the question before, just recently. Can anybody name one promise, one statement regarding anything Trump says he's going to do that does not violate the Constitution? I can't think of a damn single thing.
No, I can't either. And so then back to these Sanders voters who attended this North Carolina Trump rally. They noticed that he taunted the people as they were being hauled off, and that the crowd just was energized by this. And they'd go and tear up these people's signs and throw them at their face, totally intolerant in their stance and the way that they reacted with these people that were just perceived as being against Trump. And one of the things that these two young fellows mentioned was how supporters advocated for the basic banishment of anyone who disagreed with Trump once he became president, basically forcing them out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
That is not American values, folks. That is totalitarianism. That is the epitome of the type of fascism that we saw rise in Europe in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Well, sure, it's no different than Hitler wanting to have, Ein Reich, Ein Volk, Ein Quaff.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. One ruler or one regime, one people, and one quaff, one hairpiece. It's funny because now that lends credence to Trump's ambitions and his own narcissism, to where, because he's Trump, he can violate the First Amendment of other individuals, but nobody can do it to him.
Jeremy, let's take an example out of American history. Let's go back to the founding of the country, or actually just before the start of the revolution. In fact, years before, with the Boston Massacre.
Sure.
If we had done this the way Trumpolini is wanting to do everything, we would have just thrown the soldiers to the wolves to have them torn apart and killed.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the Sons of Liberty wanted that. And it was Sam Adams who was the leader of that, who was a provocateur of sorts with the protesting that you saw in the colonial period, who approached his cousin, John Adams, and said, look, we need somebody to defend these people here because we have to legitimize the movement, this movement of liberty. And it's not going to be done if we just lynch these people. It's got to be done through the justice system. So John Adams defended the British soldiers from the Boston Massacre. Our founding fathers went to make sure that their movement was based on justice and liberty. I'm not seeing that with Donald. We hear that he just wants to go and attack people's family, terrorist families without proof. Well, that gets difficult because, again, it does not have the color of law.
We have something here called due process. And what you were referring to with John Adams, that was one of the first instances in our early country before we even became the United States. Due process was institutionalized. It was established.
It was what separated us from the vulgarians that were against us.
Yeah, it separated, the civil species from the animals.
Much like that commenter earlier.
Yeah. And see, this is what, Randy, what really upsets me, and if quite frankly I'm embarrassed by this, is that individuals, whether they're Trump supporters, Cruz supporters of any candidates, there's individuals like this in every single crowd. Some factions have more than others, but they complain about, we're angry. We're tired of our rights being this. We're tired of rights being that. They're being violated, this and that. I have the right for this. I have the right for that. And then when they're shown exactly how their rights are being violated, they don't want to hear it. They ignore it because they can't comprehend it. And it's again,
it's emotionalism.
It's emotionalism. It's populism. It's progressivism, it's Fabianism, it's political correctness and revisionism all rolled into one. And that is a problem. And the more this continues, and again, you and I, we don't besmirch or begrudge anybody for who they're going to vote for.
No, it's their not even that little commenter. Not even the little commenter.
listen, little commenter, if you want to vote for Trump, more power to you. It's your right. And you know what? Randy and I will defend your right to vote for Trump. Even though we think he's, a cross-dresser between Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, we will still defend your right because it is the right thing to do. It is our moral and ethical and sovereign obligation to do so.
Mm-hmm.
This is what sets us apart from all of these rabid animals that when they're hit with the truth, they don't want to hear it because they're so lucid with everything that they're not capable of understanding. And again, Randy, it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It is embarrassing.
And, there's something more that I want to get at here, because if you remember, our founding fathers were protesters. The Boston Tea Party was a protest. Absolutely. And that brings me to something that Rush Limbaugh mentioned on today's program. Rush said that no destruction of private property is justified by protesters ever. That would mean he wouldn't support a modern equivalent of the Boston Tea Party. Because if you remember, the Sons of Liberty destroyed the tea that was on that vessel. Mm-hmm. Now, while it is true that the East India Trade Company was government subsidized, it was still privately owned and operated. And therefore, our founding fathers were destroying private property. That's why I find it so amazing that Rush would go out on a limb and say that. It shows that he has thrown out his faculties there, his cognitive abilities, because he's bought into this raging inferno of rage, but that detracts from the message that he used to convey. It's as though he has turned his back on everything that he at one time represented.
Well, I think there's a little bit of confusion with him on his part. Just to kind of, throw this out there. Let's look at, protesting in and of itself. The protesters at these rallies, they're there, many of them,
they're Marxists.
They're obnoxious. They're simply there to disrupt things, okay? There are individuals who are there to protest in the fashion of the true sense of the word. They're there to voice their opinion against that candidate. No matter which candidate it is, they're there to voice their opinion against that candidate. What Rush is trying to do is lump protesting together as a blanket statement. See, the protesters that are there at the Trump rally, the ones that are anti-Trump, legitimately anti-Trump, because they see him for what he is, and they say, this is not what my country is, this is not what my country stands for, and Trump throws them out, that's a legitimate protester. Yeah. That, however, is not a protester to the likes of what we saw in Ferguson.
Right.
Where these individuals were rabid animals, burning things down, causing mass chaos, killing people, violating people's rights. That's the difference. But I think what's happened is Rush is lumping those.
Well, yeah, he is because what he said was that he's mad about Ferguson. Okay, I'm mad about it too. Absolutely. Just wanton destruction of property is terrible. It's out of sync with our foundational image.
Same thing with the
LA riots that our country is. Yeah. And it steps on everything. It violates everything that is of substantive value. And we here at the Wright Flyer do not condone the social Marxists who are hell-bent of tearing our Constitution apart at the seams. But we're also realistic in understanding what it is that we have to stand for. And if we start whittling away at our fundamental and inalienable rights that were endowed to us by our Creator, meaning that no legitimate earthly authority can rightfully take them away without due process under the law, much like what John Adams did with the soldiers who were involved with the Boston Massacre, then we lose our identity as a nation and a people. And that is the risk that we're running here. Yeah, if you want to burn down the corruption and the fat in government, I'm all for it. But it better be a controlled burn.
Yes.
Because otherwise we're going to lose everything we are.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. People have lost sight about, what Thomas Jefferson said. From time to time, the roots of the tree of liberty must be replenished with the blood and watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike. People, have to understand that, with the wanton destruction, going out and just burning stuff down because you're mad, you didn't get what you want, you're a petulant child throwing a fit, you're throwing a temper tantrum. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Grow up, embrace your birthright as a sovereign citizen of the United States, and begin to understand and learn how to stand on principles and values.
And that includes standing up for the right of the popular sovereigns to protest. Sorry, Rush, we're going to disagree with you 110% on the antics that you were spewing on your program today.
And it goes deeper with that. And again, it's standing up for your principles. If someone, if there was people protesting outside my house because, let's say, I put a sign up in my front yard that says Trump is a fascist, and I had a picture of Mussolini with Trump's hairpiece on him hanging upside down from a lamppost by piano wire. Okay.
Foreshadowing.
If I had that picture in my front yard on a sign and people gathered in front of my house to protest, the second that they start to destroy my property, all bets are off, and I am well within my rights to protect my property. That means I can engage them with the equal amount of force that they are showing me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're standing out there peaceably protesting, not doing anything, and I go outside with my 12-gauge Remington 870 pump-action shotgun, I rack around in the chamber and I fire it into the air, guess what? I go to jail, and rightfully so, because at that point, I've just intimidated their rights and violated their rights to peaceably assemble and protest me.
Mm-hmm.
It is no different in that scenario than what Trump did at his rallies. It's no different than what some of his supporters did. It is no different than what Lewandowski did to Michelle Fields.
And we'll be getting into that one here soon.
You have to be able to distinguish between blind fury and righteous anger.
Mm-hmm.
Righteous anger can only occur when you are dignified and justified in doing your actions. That's it. And there has to be a standard of principles for you to stand on to cement yourself in your position with. Blind fury is nothing more than actions based on emotions, and emotions are the destructor of many of failed actions, period.
Yeah. And that's why it is so important that we all have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution. Because when you think about it, it is our fundamental and unalienable rights that means everything. If you don't have rights, you don't have anything. It is the epitome of who we are as a nation and as a people. And basically what we're seeing with respect to Donald Trump is that he has tapped into an authoritarian strain in the population. And I have to admit, in my short life, I've never seen the this authoritarian strain just bubble up to the surface like it has in this 2016 presidential election cycle. It's an ugly side. It's an ugly side of humanity. I'm not going to deny that it's a part of human nature, but it is a part of human nature that we as sentient beings should be doing our utmost to restrain, to temper. Right. That's why they say, when you get angry, you're losing your temper. Well, that's the problem. If you lose your temper, that means you lose your ability to have higher reasoning, higher logic. Your mental faculties are impaired. Much like if you imbibe in too much alcohol and become intoxicated, your mental faculties are impaired. It's a very similar circumstance, and it's something that we need to keep in mind.
Well, I'm going to make this analogy for any of our listeners that have any background in metallurgy or tool and die making or even knife making, things of that, working with steel. A good knife that holds its edge has to be tempered. You have to heat treat it. You have to temper it. You have to make sure that it's strong and durable in order for it to be functional for the duration of its life. This is akin to the temperament or the tempering of our knowledge of the Constitution and being willing to accept those principles and understand them. When you temper yourself with that kind of knowledge, when you temper yourself with not abandoning your principles for any reason whatsoever, that leads to you being able to not lose your temper, because that's the thing. When that word temper, it's the key word here. That is the glue. It is the solidity of everything that surrounds it. When you lose your temper, it's like your knife. If you have a knife that's tempered, hardened steel, high carbon hardened steel holds a great edge.
It's like breaking the blade.
You're breaking the blade because the temperament and the tempering of that blade has diminished.
Absolutely.
The Constitution is that blade. And when you allow your temper to diminish, you are diminishing your understanding and ability to stand on your principles and understand your rights.
Mm-hmm. And we must be careful not to sacrifice our liberties in the quest for vengeance
or safety.
In fact, that's what Benjamin Franklin warned us about when he said that those who sacrifice essential liberties for a false sense of security, or in this case, for a false sense of outrage,
yes,
deserve neither liberty nor security or the right to be outraged, and shall surely have none. There is an infinite wisdom behind the message that our founding fathers conveyed to the American people. It goes into the heart and soul of who we are as a nation, and it dates back to the inception of this country over 230 years ago. It is the quintessential part of the indomitable and unconquerable American spirit. But we are fast losing sight of that, and it is all because of this outrage that is being fanned by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and this charlatan and huckster that is Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini. He is pitting us against one another. Has he done anything that would be an all-out attack on our real opponents? No, he has spent all of his political capital, all of his political energies and efforts attacking our party and our Constitution and our people. The very lifeblood of this nation is what he has been assaulting on a regular basis, and it needs to stop.
I'm going to make the correlation here with the word safety or security. I understand the outrage and the anger that people have in supporting Trump. I get it. I understand. You're angry because politicians have repeatedly lied to you. Well, you know what?
They've lied to us.
They've lied to us. We're just as angry. But the thing is, here's the key difference. This is where the safety and security ties in. Your anger is what you are trying to use to formulate a sense of security or safety of not having a politician in the White House. Because Donald Trump says he's not a politician. Okay, just for a moment, let's assume that he's not a politician. You're basing and banking all of your anger and voting for him because you truly believe he's not a politician. Therefore, because he's not a politician, you're not going to have that worry of not having that security anymore, of not being lied to by politicians.
That's a pretty risky gamble to be taking, because we can't gamble with our fundamental and inalienable rights because they're non-negotiable. And that is one of the major cognizant disconnects that we have with respect to Trumpolini. He says, and has repeatedly said, that everything is negotiable. But when you stop and think about it, there are terms and conditions and contracts, and make no bones about it, folks, our shared Constitution is the greatest social contract ever penned by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by Providence itself, that are non-negotiable. They are things that if you try and negotiate them, you breach the contract. That is where we are. That is the danger that we are facing collectively as popular sovereigns. Remember that the first lines to the preamble to the entire sacred document that is our Constitution starts off with, "We the people." The problem is, when you listen to Donaldus, is it ever "we"?
It's
Rarely.
I.
It's I, me.
No.
Ein Reich, ein Volk.
Ein quaff. Now,
Well,
here's the thing. Not only is he wrong in saying that everything is negotiable, not only is he wrong, because first, and I'll simplify this. The United States has a policy that has long been in place, even though it hasn't been enforced. We do not negotiate with terrorists. So that right there proves that he's wrong. But more so, I'm going to bring this back to we the people. We the people are the ones who endowed this Constitution. We are the ones who it is done on our behalf.
we are the supreme arbiters of authority.
Exactly. With him wanting to negotiate, thinking everything's negotiable, not only does he mean that your rights are negotiable, but he means that you are negotiable.
Well, think about it, because one of your rights is the fundamental
Right to
and
life.
inalienable right to life.
Everything's negotiable. That means that he is saying that your life is negotiable, meaning that if you don't fit his narrative, he is going to have you removed.
Mm-hmm. And you see, folks, this ties into what we've said. We are all angry. Our rights have been and continue to be under assault. But it doesn't make any sense to throw those rights away just to punish corruption. Restoring the Constitution and reducing the scope and size and application of government is the only way to rectify the nation's woes. This is something that we have been harping on since our first episode. It is something that remains applicable today. It will always remain to be the case so long as every level of government, from local municipalities all the way up to the federal government, are ignoring and refusing to adhere to the sacred natural law principles that underpin our entire Constitution. And the problem that we have with Trumpolini is he doesn't address this. It's as though it doesn't even register with him. And that is a major problem. It is something that is threatening the life of the country. We've already got the problem of the identity crisis that's been foisted onto us by the Fabian socialist-controlled Democrats. But Donald has taken kerosene from his quaff and just thrown it onto the fire, and that has caused it to blaze out of control.
And again, we don't have a problem with rectifying the situation by proverbially burning the system down. We have the right to petition our government for a redress of grievances. Part of that petitioning the redress of grievances is the voting process. It is the voting process. But when you want to vote for an individual that just wants to say, I'm going to burn it down and this and that, he doesn't understand the ramifications of that. I'm all for the destruction of a tyrannical government. Absolutely. I'm all for it. I'm all for getting rid of the cronyism, the detente wing of the Republican Party, all the corruption at every level, local, state, county, all the way up to the top.
You know, the problem with Trump is he's a repetition of the mistake that we made in 2008 and 2012. More so 2012 than 2008.
Yeah.
What was Romney's position? He didn't have a position. His position was anti-Obama. What is Trump's position? It's anti-establishment. But does he have anything further to base it on? Because if you don't have a foundation, and if you don't have reasoned principles behind it, you are going to sail to defeat each and every time. This vessel is leaking from the start, and if we just hop onto this bandwagon, we are most assuredly going to sink our country, and we can ill afford that. We cannot afford to gamble everything away, because right now we are at a precarious position as a nation and as a people. Our system of law is under threat. You want to know why there's chaos? And you want to know why these protesters feel that they can just go out and destroy everything? It is because we now selectively enforce our laws. We have turned our back to the Constitution. And by going, throwing your weight behind somebody who has stated that his whole intent and purpose for running is just to be a wrecking ball, that is not conducive for restoring a country. That is conducive for destroying a country. I would rather restore than destroy.
See, wrecking balls are great things. They truly are. But so long as a person has the understanding and the knowledge to operate that wrecking ball, you can't just, it's like giving a monkey a hand grenade.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. He doesn't think about the ramifications or the implications of what he's saying he's going to do. He wants, if his whole main goal is to destroy the corruption in Washington, D.C., I'm fine with that.
The problem with that is he's the one that funded it and allowed it.
Right. And that's why it cannot be a controlled burn.
Yeah.
That is why it's the monkey with the hand grenade.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing, you have to have somebody in there that understands how to operate that kind of machinery. Mm-hmm. I would rather have somebody who has held political office that knows the inner workings. See, Trump's extent of knowing how these politicians work are him handing them a check and them saying thank you, and then them saying, by the way, we have this event, let's go play golf, do whatever, we have a wedding, so on and so forth. Ted Cruz, and even to the extent of Marco Rubio just a little bit, they have experience in there. Trump doesn't have experience holding office. He just doesn't.
Yeah, it's a difference between skilled and unskilled labor. Would you want to take your automobile to an untrained mechanic when you have a specialized automobile? Because think of it this way. The Constitution is a specialized automobile. It's very unique. It's one of a kind. Would you really want to trust that to some Joe Blow who hasn't had any training? No, of course not. That would be tantamount to insanity. That would be wasting your investment. Well, we have a bequestment here, meaning a birthright. That is our Constitution, which is the safeguard for all of those fundamental and inalienable rights that were endowed to us by our Creator. And therefore, we want somebody who has an understanding of that to wield the reins of political power. Now, I can already hear the shrill tones of some of the trumpeters in the back of my mind saying, well, Randy, there were politicians and they got us here. No. The politicians couldn't have gotten us here if there wasn't somebody there to back it, to finance it, to allow it to go into place. So it makes a whole hell of a lot of sense, doesn't it, to say that, well, I'm sick and tired of the corruption, I'm sick and tired of the politicians, so I'm going to throw my vote behind somebody who allowed them to do it, somebody who encouraged them. And by the way, if he's saying that he's bought politicians, what does that say about the message that he has been conveying? If he's truly bought them, why didn't he have them rein back? Why didn't he have them stand up for what he's saying he would fix to resolve the problems? Look at his base of operations, New York City. Now, he funded Bill de Blasio, who is just a few fries short of being an all out and out communist. That tells me all I need to know. And no, it's not merely doing the cost of business, because he's not managing. And we see that there's a track record from his own business dealings where he is poor in management, because companies that are well managed don't go bankrupt.
I'm confused again, Randy. And it seems to be happening a lot on this episode. But you bring up the fact that if he's bought these politicians, he hasn't been able to rein them in. I want to take it a step further. I have a question that has created this confusion.
Okay.
He has given money to Hillary Clinton.
He was her top donor.
He was her top donor. So therefore, in essence, one could say that he bought her. Mm-hmm. Why is she running on the opposite side against him?
Well, because he magically had a change of heart.
Well,
except he didn't.
And see, this is the thing. If he bought all of these politicians, and he even said so himself, on both sides of the aisle, all of them, I've given them all money. Why aren't they all endorsing him, if that's the case?
Good question. And the reason is that they see that they have dirt on him. That's the problem. They can use his funding of them in a propagandistic way straight out of the leaves of Joseph Goebbels' tenets of propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And what they'd use is what's known as black propaganda. They'd put it out as, it's based on anonymity, so-and-so said. And they would use that to assassinate his character. But it's not hard to assassinate his character when he doesn't have any character to begin with. That is another problem. He has shown himself to be unethical. Because if you are going to fund both sides of the aisle, that's not something I consider ethical.
No.
In fact, it creates a conflict of interest, and that is not something that can just be ignored.
Well, there was, speaking of being unethical, look at the lies that he's told.
Oh, sure. He is the Lord of the lies.
Yes. The deceiver, the bringer of death.
And all that is evil.
The Dark Lord, Beelzebub, even.
Yes.
I mean, we can make that connotation to him. This is why I said his devilish deeds earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He has sold his soul to Satan. And I know there's individuals in my life that are going to think that I'm absolutely bonkers for saying this. But let's look at the facts. Everything that he has done has pointed to this direction. This is, again, why I asked the question, because it all boils down to what we've been talking about with regard to the Constitution. Not once has he mentioned anything about supporting the Constitution and used that as a key point or issue in any of his rallies, any of his speeches, and any of the debates.
And, that's a great transition into the next segment here, which is when Trump speaks of, removing the public figure exception to libel laws,
mm-hmm.
he assaults the First Amendment.
Absolutely.
The press and the people would suffer from the chilling impact on speech. We stand against any such chilling impact from anyone who advances it. I don't care if it's the Tooth Fairy, if it's, Mitt Romney with a good haircut, or Mittens Romnikins, if Ted Cruz advocated something like that, you can bet your bottom dollar that I would be out in the forefront saying, no, this is wrong, and I don't support it. His base of support, his being Texas Senator Ted Cruz, his base of support would evaporate if he did something like that. But when you see Trump do it, it seems to reinvigorate and rekindle the flame of anger and this out-of-control inferno that is threatening to destroy our republic. And folks, I'm not saying this in a disparaging fashion. I'm not thumbing my nose at the Trump voters. I'm alarmed just that they are willing to disregard that which has been our safeguard, that which has defined us. Because if you blow that all up, when you come to the first crisis, which there will be a crisis in the term of the next president, we're not going to know how to react because we won't know who the hell we are anymore.
Well, this is why on our last show together, Randy, I made the analogy and I brought up the 10 Commandments. See, with doing away with the libel and slander laws, essentially what he's doing is setting himself up to say, if you speak out against me,
I'm going to punish you.
I'm going to punish you. See, what he's done was taken John Adams' Alien Sedition Acts, wrapped it in everything that Hitler did, all of his propaganda, all of his speeches, rolled it up nice and tight, and now he's regurgitating all of that in a full frontal fashion. This is no different than Dathan, who was one of the Israelites, one of the people that fled Egypt when Moses went up onto the mount to get the word of God, the 10 Commandments. And while he was up there, Dathan is the one that says, you know what? Moses is up there. He's not coming back, this and that. We don't need any laws. We're capable of governing ourselves. And he was the one that says, just listen to what I have to say, do this, this, and this. And it was nothing but total chaos.
Yeah.
What Trump is doing is advocating and setting the tone for a position to be taken to where all of our laws are thrown out the window as a whole, meaning complete destruction of the Constitution.
Yeah.
It's lunacy. It is absolute lunacy. And if you remember, folks, how that story goes with the 10 Commandments, what happened, many of them died. There was a great earthquake. The ground opened up and swallowed many of them whole because of their ignorance, because of their stupidity, because of their allegiance to wanting to have no law. If you vacate and violate and destroy one law, every other law is going to fall right into that footstep eventually. It doesn't matter if it's one of the simplest laws. All laws are made in pursuance, meaning in the following of the Constitution, in adherence to the Constitution, because it is the supreme law of the land. You take one of those laws that is constitutional and you do away with it and you throw it out the window, guess what? You're throwing the entire Constitution out because you're violating the whole thing. Absolutely.
Now, as you all know, we have been frequent critics here on the Wright Flyer of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It's because they have been derelict in their duty of vetting candidates. Just look at the disaster that Barack Hussein Obama has been for the American people and for our nation. It has led us to these great identity crises and dilemmas that we are facing right now, and which the brash, vulgarian New York billionaire businessman and real estate tycoon has been, exploiting for his raw opportunism. And one of the areas where you can clearly see that he is being a raw opportunist is with the way that he treated a now former, because she resigned today, reporter with Breitbart News. Now, of course, Breitbart was named after Andrew Breitbart, who was a strong advocate for grassroots conservative movements. And isn't it interesting to note that shortly before he died, he came out and said that Trump was a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And he must be spinning at 750 revolutions per minute in his grave, knowing what has happened to his namesake, to that nest egg that he created as an outlet for the people, but also as a beacon of truth. Well, that beacon has been tarnished because Breitbart could rightfully be called Trumpbart News, the way that they've been covering things in this 2016 presidential election cycle. And the story with Michelle Fields is that she was pulled by her arm to such an extent that it bruised her. And this was with a Trump campaign manager by the name of Corey Lewandowski, who had a track record or a criminal record. If you dig into his past, you'll see that he was arrested during a campaign thing for trying to bring a loaded handgun into, I believe it was a Senate office building. Mm-hmm. That shows lack of judgment. And then his actions again tonight, or not tonight, but when that incident took place over the weekend, he showed that he had no restraints, that he had no ability to act as a dignified human being. And it goes again to what Jeremy was speaking to, comparing him to animals. He is acting on this animalistic base instinct, and now the Trumpeteers are saying he's lying, because even though the video footage is there, well, if you look at the original one, yes, it's not clear to see everything that's in it, but you see the commotion. And then we see that from one of these little propaganda sites that have popped up for
Printly.com.
Printly and Paltry and conservative house. They doctored the video. Mm-hmm. They've edited it in such a way to make it appear as though Fields was lying. And then, I love this, little orphan Annie Toto Yap Yap was sitting there, yep. Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, yep. Michelle Fields, they're all traitors, yep. Button it, Annie. Button it. Because what you're doing is, despite your legal training, despite being a member in good standing of, I believe it's the Connecticut State Bar, you are violating your oath of office, going after and defending criminals. That is an ethics violation. And yes, this is a criminal situation now because charges of assault and battery have been filed.
Now, I understand how, charges get filed. It's because of the prosecutor. The prosecutor, no prosecutor is going to levy charges against an individual unless there's substantial evidence to warrant a standing for those charges.
Yeah, it's known as probable cause. And right. If they don't have probable cause, they can be in a world of hurt.
Absolutely. Speaking of, like being disbarred and never being able to practice law ever again.
Look at Mike Nifong, who was the district attorney that prosecuted the Duke Lacrosse faux rape case.
Sure. Now, little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto, she needs to, again, learn how to use words in proper context. Calling Cruz a traitor. Do you even know what the word traitor means? It means someone who turns their back on their country.
Gives aid and comfort to the enemy. That's not
how did that happen? How did that happen with them coming out and actually supporting Ben Shapiro, who has actually supported Michelle Fields? Where's the traitorism that comes from that?
Well, this is der Angst again with Breitbart. Mm. They've become the Pravda of the Trump campaign.
Sure.
So much to a point where we've now seen internal memos within the Breitbart organization where the leadership was coming out and saying, don't defend our reporter. Don't stand by her.
Don't even retweet what she's tweeted because it could be used against us.
Well, it's certainly going to be used against you now because you didn't stand up for the principles of your founders. And when you betray that, that is being a traitor, not on a national sense, but on the organizational sense. And with respect to the mission statement that Breitbart had for his organization, they are essentially defecating on his memory. And that is morally abhorrent. And it speaks to the character and quality of the people that are running Breitbart. And of course, this is why you're seeing a mass exodus of their reporters.
Well, where's their loyalty? Where has their loyalty for their reporters ever existed? Or has it only existed when it fits their narrative? When their reporters, towed the line for them? You see what I'm saying?
It's a selective support.
Yeah.
And that goes against the principle of a free press, which we see is protected by the First Amendment. This now seems to resemble a top-down center command structure where the orders are coming from the quaff itself, the order of the quaff, down to the lowest levels of the base reporters. And they are rebelling against that. And folks, I think that we would be totally accurate in saying that this is a microcosm of what will happen if Trump secures the nomination, because it will tear the gutless opposition party, or GOP, apart.
And it's almost, getting back to Lewandowski, this thing about, him having a criminal record and then doing something like this, it's almost like he's adopted Trump's demeanor. And it's like, that whole action of quaff Moses took place. He behaves in a way to where, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm above the law. I got away with this, so I can get away with this.
Follicular transfer.
Yeah, interfollicular transfer, quaff Moses. So, yeah. I mean, it's again these very things that are transpiring, as inane and infantile as they are still rooted in the premise and the foundational creation that Trump claims he's everything against. The cronyism, the corruption, this and that. These things are happening within your own campaign. You're telling people that you're going to end all of that stuff, but you're allowing it to happen within your own campaign. You are a hypocrite and a fraud.
And, speaking of this quaff Moses, as you put it, this interfollicular transfer, we see that now, all of a sudden, when things are happening at Breitbart, they're saying that all of these reporters that left, that they were, abandoning Andrew Breitbart's vision. Of course, that totally disregards the fact that Andrew Breitbart would never have supported Trump, based on the statements that he made shortly before his untimely death. And now, so it's okay when they were part of Breitbart and preaching the message of Trumpolini, but as soon as they step out of line, now all of a sudden their entire record is just ignored, and they are a bunch of goons and goombas that are part of the liberal establishment. Folks, that is Orwellian in nature. Go back and read 1984, and you'll see things like strength is weakness. Oh, this country is our enemy today, but it's our ally tomorrow, but our enemy again the day after tomorrow. That is the sort of instability that we are seeing just fumigating out of the Trump camp. And it is not going to be beneficial for the country, and that is a surefire way not to resolve the problems that are afflicting and plaguing our great republic, or our once great republic, as it is now.
And you know what that is, folks? That's the winds blowing and picking up an ember and dropping it off somewhere at random. and it catching fire and burning out of control.
And we have no firewall. See, the way Trump is approaching this, he would set up the Constitution as a firewall. That is unacceptable. And we won't tolerate it, and we won't stand for it. And that is why you're not going to be able to get people to coalesce behind him. They see him for the madman that he is.
Yeah, it's almost like at this point he's preparing himself to be Nero.
Fiddling while America burns.
Exactly. He's saying, it's just, and again, it's maddening. It's, creating rage. But above all of that, it's an embarrassment. Mm-hmm. It's absolute embarrassment. I mean, hell, even Europe is asking, what's the United States doing? What is wrong with them? Why are they allowing this to happen? They have the world's best system of government, the freest country in all of the earth, and they're allowing this to happen. It's embarrassing.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous. And, folks, it's really bad. It's really, heartbreaking when countries like France actually hold more credibility in their system of governance than we do.
Yeah.
And I can safely say that because I know if even France can muster all their strength and come after me by myself, they're still going to lose. But, it's sad where their system of governance is actually functioning better than ours.
And this is because of the onslaught that has been against the Constitution for well over a century now. Mm-hmm. And Trump is not the solution. He is basically the coup de grace, to use the French term, the death blow that will be the death blow to our Constitution, except that when you think about it, our Constitution, being based on these natural law principles, is by its nature timeless. And therefore, it can't die unless we allow it to.
What this is, it's a conglomeration of things, and I'm going to have another analogy here. Mm-hmm. And I'll freely admit this, that when I was younger, I've been to bonfires and parties and stuff like this. We've had bonfires, and people have actually taken paint cans or aerosol cans, throw them in the fire just to hear the boom. What Trump is doing, see, our country's on fire now. It's a bonfire. It's somewhat controlled because our Constitution is not completely stripped away from us. But what Trump is doing, it's like he's taking a dump truck full of ammunition, live rounds, and dumping it into the middle of that bonfire. When those rounds superheat, they're going to discharge, and we don't know where those projectiles are going to land. And in the process of doing that, it's going to spread the embers, and the wind's going to pick up, and it's going to catch everything else on fire in its path.
Yeah. And,
total
again,
destruction, chaos.
Right. And it falls on we, the people, to be the popular sovereigns that we were always intended to be. That is the way that our founding fathers devised this country. And I think that the only way that we can do this is to support the only candidate who's standing there, standing up for the Constitution. Now, again, we're not telling you how to vote. That's not our place. We cannot tell you how to exercise your fundamental and unalienable rights. That falls squarely with you. But this is just the food for thought. You need to approach it from a constitutional lens, because that is what our founders would expect. That is what the up-and-coming generations and those generations that have yet to be born would expect. They would expect us to take these steps, to do what is right morally and from the stance of a sovereign. Because if we don't move to restore our power and to preserve our power, nobody will, because that is a responsibility that falls squarely on our shoulders, and that is by design, to prevent tyranny, to prevent despotism, to prevent oppression. Because make no mistake about it, folks, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trempolini is presenting himself as a strongman, as an authoritarian, and we will not tolerate that in this country, because we are a country that's based on liberty, that is based on popular sovereignty. It is a quintessential part of our DNA, and I don't think we should just urinate it away in the wind. And I will do everything that I can, just as I know Jeremy will do everything he can, and our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, would do everything he could to prevent that from happening. And that is the food for thought that you need to look at when making these determinations as to who is best qualified. Because if you don't act in that way, if you don't apply the constitutional lens, you're just adding fuel to this fire, this inferno that is threatening to engulf this representative republic of ours. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your Captain, Randy Wright, and I've been joined by my First Officer, Jeremy Grapington. We want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We also invite you to leave comments and questions like that one little H in rules did.
No matter how inane they may be.
Yeah. And as you saw, we do address them. We also invite you to leave questions, comments, concerns on our Google Plus page or our Facebook page, and to follow us at Twitter with our Twitter handle of @RadioAviationX. Folks, that's all one word, @RadioAviationEX. One more time, @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board, which has Jeremy's personal account, my personal account, and most importantly, our Cafe Press account, where we have wonderful merchandise that you really ought to check out. And go ahead and give us a little bit of support here, folks, so that we can keep bringing this program to you, because after all, we are doing this for you. We couldn't do this without you, and we want to be able to keep doing this for you. With that said, folks, we will see you next time. Do take care. Goodbye.